So a very quick introduction for me. So a professor in the business school at Exeter. My prior focus was very much looking at networks of people in large organizations and various publications in academic, but importantly in applied management journals. So for me, it's important to feed back what I call best practices to people involved in organizations. Next slide, please. So what we know is that networks matter. So networks give you access to new and existing materials and services, new customers, knowledge, advice, social support, etc. There can be a sounding board. I know this from academic research, my own research in large organizations, but very much wanted to understand why do networks matter in SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. Next slide, please. So our study, the focus is how do enterprises use their networks to help them make decisions and to develop their businesses, and specifically in Cornwall. So to date, we've done 15 one-hour interviews in 14 enterprises, and we've looked at a whole host of different enterprises. So some are sole traders, some are slightly larger enterprises, startups, sort of brand new enterprises to more established ones. So trying to get an understanding across a range of different organizations. So the initial findings that we have, and I say we've just finished interviewing. So initial findings is essentially not one size fits all. If I think about networks within large organizations, often it's more obvious what type of network is going to be effective. This is less so from the SMEs that we've been looking at. So there's a considerable range of the size. Some people have 2 or 3 key individuals they go to. Others have networks of hundreds of people. For some, it's made up of family, friends. Others, it's suppliers, local, national, international individuals. Some ties are what I'd call trusted. So they're very strong relationships, ongoing relationships with others. Others are more transactional. It's more sort of based upon price, essentially. You want something and you pay a certain amount. And if we look at the origins of these relationships, they can be long-term friends, the colleagues of colleagues, friends of friends, all sorts of different things going on. So our aim is to try and get a better understanding of this. Next slide, please. So in the interviews that we've looked at, what do the owners reach out for? So they reach out for support, training, coaching, client, supplier, partner networks, finance, obviously. And actually, a lot of them look to academia and the university for expertise, but also for legitimacy. And this is to some extent different to what would happen in large organizations. Often people get different types of resources from different people, but sometimes they get one or more from one particular individual as well, what we call a multiplex relationship. Next slide, please. In general, everybody understood the importance of networks. So quotes here, people have said, my network is my most important thing. People have identified that some of them are sort of more networky type of people. They will talk to all sorts of different individuals. So there's a quote here from somebody flying down from Gatwick to Newquay, was chatting to the person next to them, and all of a sudden they've exchanged business cards and they were later to become partners. So some people seem to be more sort of adept at what we'd call networking, but others who maybe would admit to being less adept are also very effective with regards to how they use their networks. There's what I call a ripple effect. So the idea that it's not just the people you know, it's the people that they know. So individuals looking for staffing, you tell 10 people, they tell 10 people, etc. All of a sudden you can reach thousands of people. So this ripple effect is very important for SMEs. Next slide, please. So what are they seeking out? Often they're seeking out for critical advice. And so not just advice, but critical advice. And actually being very thoughtful with regards to, well, who should I go to? So let's say I've got 20 people in my network. Who should I go to get this critical advice? So thinking about who can give me wisdom with regards to a specific situation, who has knowledge of this and has experienced it previously, maybe at a higher level. Also looking for, say, critical friends. So not just a friend and not just for advice, but sort of this mixture of the two. So checking in and help to boost morale and just general motivation has been suggested by one individual. Next slide, please. Family and friends are important. There's definitely benefits with regards to friendship. So people walking their dogs, this has happened more than once in actual fact. So there's various people walking around the countryside in Cornwall discussing key things with regards to their enterprises and getting great feedback, walking along the beach as well. So in my head, I imagine all these people in Cornwall walking and talking and getting all this wonderful information. But others reflected upon this and thought, well, okay, well, friendship is great, but sometimes if you work very closely with a friend, what happens if you got to fire them? And that's not such a good thing. So there's some caveats with regards to the benefits of friendship. Next slide, please. Trusted ties, this was key to what a lot of people were saying. So building up trusted networks of people over, in this case, 16 years, one person indicated, and that they see their suppliers as partners as opposed to just suppliers. So building up these strong relationships. Quite a few people had worked in London previously or other big cities and had moved down to Cornwall, and they recognized that the way that things worked in Cornwall is different. So they talked about a vouching for system, so where one individual is vouching for another. And it was important not to vouch for somebody you didn't entirely trust, because that could have a negative effect. But again, trusted ties maybe don't always give the best advice. If you go to people who are too close to you, maybe they don't give the best advice. Maybe you should be looking further afield. So again, reflection upon the importance of different types of ties. Next slide, please. Business groups. This again was key, and again different to what often happens in larger organizations where you're staying within the organization. So people are going out to various different networks: Academic Health Science Network, Southwest Digital Health Accelerator Network, the Chamber of Commerce was mentioned a lot of different times, but also groups of individuals that people had belonged to. And often, even after those groups had sort of dissipated, they still clung together and contacted each other. So business groups, either ongoing or sort of previous ones, were important. Next slide, please. People understood the importance of creating new connections, often with people with similar mindsets, similar values, which was important. Also critical was maintaining existing ties. So not just jettisoning people because they find something new and interesting with others, but keeping those ties closer to them over long periods of time. And again, trust is related to that. And next slide, please. Technology, important too. Twitter, LinkedIn, these types of things, other ways of communicating with people, reaching out to people are important. And then I think the last slide, and maybe we have a minute for questions. So, so next steps. So we're just starting to analyze the interviews. With lots of things that we've seen, but we're now looking for patterns. Where's the consistency? We want to share the findings back with respondents and disseminate to a wider audience. And what I hope to do is to use this information to create a survey to then distribute across a wider number of SMEs in Cornwall, so we can have a sort of a larger view, a more holistic view of what's happening with regards to networks and decision making. I think that's the last one. So thank you for that. Emma, do we have time for a minute or two of questions?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. That was really good. One question from Laura Fleming that's come up in the chat is, Andrew, do you see any differences between individual networks for SMEs versus larger organizations?
Yes, so for individual networks, it's very much based upon the person, that the connections the person has. Maybe it's family, maybe it's friends, this type of thing. Once you start to get to, let's say, medium-sized enterprises, and certainly with the work that I've done with larger organizations, it's more the connections to the firm. So it's not just to a particular individual. It then starts to be maybe to a role within a firm or the firm itself. So definitely it becomes different. It's less sort of individualized to the person.
Thank you. And another question we've had was from Belinda Broughton. Was there a preference between in-person networking or online networking? Did the SMEs you interviewed give a sense that the last year impacted on developing networks?
I think generally there's always a preference for in-person and having a cup of coffee or whatever it might be in a chat, but also a realization that now it's sort of a norm to connect online, that they can reach out to other people that they maybe hadn't talked to as often further afield. So there's definitely a let's say a preference for face-to-face, but there are benefits with regards to the sort of accessibility of people that individuals have noticed.